Okay, today we're going to be reviewing everything you see today you've seen before this year and in middle school. We're going to identify the initial value, which is the y-intercept, from a table, graph, equation, or verbal description. We're going to use the slope and y-intercepts to write a linear function in the form y equals mx plus b from any representation such as tables, graphs, or verbal descriptions. And we're going to graph a linear equation given an equation. Okay, this is the easiest thing to do. If they give you y equals mx plus b, we all know m is the what? The slope. And b is the y-intercept. Okay, so sometimes they'll ask a question this simple. They'll say, write the equation of the line with the given slope and y-intercept. Slope is -2 and y-intercept is 5. So what would the equation of the line look like using that information? Right, y equals -2x plus 5. All you have to do is take the slope of -2, and it goes in the m place of the equation. And if the y-intercept is 5, 5 goes in the b place of the equation. So for number 2, if the slope is 3 over 4 and the y-intercept is -3, what would the equation look like? Right, instead of plus and negative, just -3. Okay, those are the easiest kind of problems you're going to see with this. You can't get any easier than that. They spell it out for you. All you have to do is plug them in the appropriate place of the equation. Okay, the next way they might ask you to write the equation of the line is if they give you a graph. Okay, now keep in mind, to write the equation of the line, you have to know two things. The slope, which goes in the m place, and the y-intercept, which goes in the b place. How do you find the slope when you're given a graph? Okay, you can do all that, but really that's too much work when you're given the graph. Think about it. Slope is also known as what? Rise over run. So can't you just start at the left point and rise 1, 2, 3, 4? And then wouldn't you have to run to the right 1, 2, 3? So 4 over 3. Now, had you taken the time to do your y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, you would have got 4 over 3, but to me that's too much work when you can literally just count the blocks. Right, the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis and it crosses at -5. So now we have the information, the same kind of information they gave us up there. We're ready to write the line. And what will the equation of this line look like? Right. Okay, why don't you take a second and try number 4 before we do it together. Alright, for the slope, this time your line's going down. So when you rise, you're actually going down 2. So that would be -2 in the rise. And then you have to run 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, -2 over 4 can be reduced to -1/2. And you should reduce it because on the test, like the multiple choices, it's going to be reduced. Okay, what's the y-intercept of this line? +1. So now that we have the slope and the y-intercept, what does the equation look like? Right, don't forget your x beside your m and then +1. Okay, now turn to the next page and try 5 and 6 by yourself. Video back. Alright, number 5. When you did the slope, the rise over run, how many did you have to rise? Look, 1, 2, 3, 4. So your rise is a +4 because you went up 4. How many do you have to run? 1, 2, 3. And since you go right 3, it's a +3. What was the y-intercept? 2, because it crosses the y-axis at +2. So now that we have the slope and the y-intercept, what does the equation look like?
Y equals 4 over 3x plus 2.
Right. Pay attention in the front. Okay, number 6. What's different about number 6?
It ain't got no points.
Right, so you have to choose where you want them. So you just have to choose a place where it crosses nicely. Like right there, doesn't it cross through nicely? And then, like right there it does. Okay, so yeah, the x and the y-intercept are two places that it crosses through the graph nicely. So if I want to find the slope, this time I have to go what direction first? Down. You always go from the left point to the right point. So to get from left to right this time, you have to go down 1, 2, 3. So your rise is -3. And that makes sense because shouldn't a line that's going down have a negative slope? And then you have to run right 2, which is +2. Okay, what's the y-intercept? -3. So now that we have our slope and our y-intercept, we're ready to write the final equation. Right. Y equals -3/2x minus 3. Okay, now we're going to learn how to write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form given a table. Okay, think about it. To find slope, don't you just have to do the slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1? So everybody knows that to find the m, that's the slope, you use the slope formula, which is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So you obviously have to plug in 2 y values and 2 x values. Well look, we're given 5 x values and 5 y values, but we only need 2 of each. So you get to choose which 2 points do you want to work with. Okay, but that's only 1 point. What other point do you want to work with? Okay. So if we're using those points, 0, 1 is the first point that was picked. So we'll call it x1, y1, because that's the first point we picked. And then 1, 3 was the second point we picked, so we'll call it x2, y2. Well, now that we've labeled them like that, don't we know exactly where to put them in the formula? So m equals, what goes first? Minus over. Right, you just do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And what does that become?
2 over 1.
Right, which you could also just call 2 if you wanted to. So your slope is 2. Now, they want you to write the whole equation though. We only have the m. What do you have to find to do the whole equation? The y-intercept, which is your b, correct? Now, let's talk about what a y-intercept is. On a graph, what is the y-intercept? Right, where it crosses the y-axis. Now, so if it hits the y-axis, what's the x value of that point if it's on the y-axis? Right, think about it. To be a y-intercept, doesn't the x value of that point have to be 0? Otherwise, if you moved off, would it be on the y-axis anymore? If you moved left or right? So, to find the y-intercept from a table, all you have to do is look at where x equals 0. And that means your y-intercept is +1. So what's the equation of this line now that we know the m and the b? Right. Okay, so let's try the next one. Well, let me do one more and then I'll let y'all try the next one. Okay, so they want the equation of this line. Okay, well, that means we have to find the slope and the y-intercept. Which one's really easier to find? The y-intercept is easier because to find the y-intercept, you just have to look for what? The one where x is 0. See, when x equals 0, y equals 3, so your y-intercept's 3. Just think about it. If you plotted the point 0, 3, isn't that just up 3 on the y-axis? So that's your y-intercept. Now, how do you find the slope? Kendall? You're just stretching? Okay, how do you find the slope? Anybody? Right, you use the slope formula. Right. Anytime you want to find the slope and you don't have a picture of the graph where you can just count up and over or down and over, you have to use this formula. But think about it. All this formula requires is 2 different y values and 2 different x values. Well, we have 5 different x values and 5 different y values. So you get to choose the ones you want to work with. Which?
0. No, negative.
Why would you work with a decimal when you don't have to? I mean, you can, but...
0
0, 3, and 2, 2. How about that? Okay, so we're working with 0, 3, and 2, 2. Aren't both of those ordered pairs? Aren't both of those x and y values? But to make them different, you have to call this one x1, y1, and this one x2, y2. Now you plug them into the formula. So it'll be m equals, right, over, which becomes, right, so your slope is -1/2. And so what's your equation of the line? Right. Now, do you think that I could have chosen to work with 2 other points and still got a slope of -1/2?
Yes.
Yes, you can. Like, let's say that I chose to work with these with the decimals this time. Okay, -1, 3.5, and 1, 2.5. Let's say that those are the 2 points we chose to work with. This is your x1, y1, and your x2, y2. So in the formula, wouldn't that be 2.5 minus 3.5 over 1 minus -1, which becomes 1 plus 1? What's 2.5 minus 3.5? And what's 1 plus 1? Which is the same thing we got using the other 2 points. The reason it works like that is because these points form a line. They're linear. And so no matter which points you choose, you're going to get the same slope every time because they're all on the same line. Okay, go ahead and try this example. Find the slope and the y-intercept, and then write the equation of the line in y equals mx plus b form. Okay. Which one's easier to find, the slope or the y-intercept?
The y-intercept.
Right. What is the y-intercept?
-1.
Right. When x is 0, that's your y-intercept. Because think about it. If you plotted the point 0, -1, wouldn't you just move down 1 on the y-axis and it'd be sitting on the y? So that's your y-intercept. How do you find your slope given a table of values? Right. So to be able to use that formula, don't you need to pick 2 points to plug into it? Which, okay. So if those are the points you're using, -2, -7, and 3, 8, this was the first point you told me, so I'll call it x1, y1, and this was the second point, so I'll call it x2, y2, and now you just plug them in. So it's m equals 8 minus -7, because remember, the formula already has a minus. So it's minus, this minus is part of the formula, this minus is part of that 7. So that becomes a plus. And then over, right, so again, minus is from the formula, but then that minus is because it was a -2, so that becomes a plus. And so what does that become? Pay attention. Which reduces to 3/1 or just 3, however you want to write it. Now, is there anybody that used 2 different points and got that same slope? Yeah, no matter which points you use, you're going to get a slope of 3 once it's reduced because these points form a straight line. So they're going to have the same slope. They're all sitting on the same line. Okay, next page. Oh, we forgot to write the final equation. Y equals? Right. Okay. Okay, now we're going to learn how to find the slope given 2 points. So this is just what we just did. It's just they didn't give us a table for us to choose 2 points. They gave us the 2 points to use. So this is my x1, y1 because that's the first point. This is my x2, y2 because that's the second point. So what will it look like when you plug them in the formula? Right? And that becomes -1 over -2, which will then reduce to +1/2, because a negative divided by negative is a positive. Okay, go ahead and try 2, 3, and 4. Find the slope using the given point. Okay, what did you get for number 2? The slope is -4/3. Okay, because -3 minus 1 is -4. 1 minus a -2 is 1 plus 2, which is 3. Okay, number 3, what'd you get? 0/4, which is just, no, 0. 0 divided by anything is 0. What kind of line would that form? horizontal, because think about it. If you went 1, 2, that'd be right 1 up 2. If you went 5, 2, wouldn't that be right 5 up 2? So since they have the same y value, it's going to make a horizontal line. All horizontal lines have 0 slope because they have 0 steepness. Number 4, you would end up getting 3 minus a negative 1, which is over, which is, no, no. If you type in your calculator 4 divided by 0, you get an error. That's because it's called undefined. No, because 5 minus 5 is 0. Yes, yes. Now, undefined lines are vertical. Because think about it. 5 negative 1 would be right 5 down 1. 5, 3 would be right 5 up 3. So they're going to be on top of each other making a vertical line, and all vertical lines have undefined slope. Okay, remember, to find the slope of a graph, you do the slope formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I want you to go ahead and try 5 and 6. It's 2 different ways. I want you to write the equation of both of these lines. Go and look at them. Remember, I want the entire equation of y equals mx plus b points. We need the m and we need the b. To find the m, when you're given a graph, what's the only thing you have to do? Just count, rise over run. To get from the left point to the right point, you have to go what direction first? Down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So down 6 and then over 2. And what does that reduce to? Negative 3 over 1, which is just negative 3, right? And think about it. Isn't negative 3 the same thing as negative 3 over 1? Look what happens when I go down 3, right 1. Down 3, right 1. Don't I still land on the line? Okay, now what is the y-intercept? So you just put minus 2. Okay, so that's how you do it from a graph. Now from a table, it's not as easy because you can't just count rise over run. How do you find the slope? You have to do what? Right, you have to use this slope formula. So that means we have to pick 2 different y values and 2 different x values to use. Which ones do y'all want to use? Which one? Okay, so 0, 1, and 2, 5. They just wrote them vertically this time. So if we're using the point 0, 1, and 2, 5, this is my first point, so I'll call it x1, y1, and this is my second point. So I'll call it x2, y2. So that's 5 minus 1 over 2 minus 0, which becomes 4 over, just 4 over 2, right? Because 2 minus 0 is just 2, and so that just reduces to 2 or 2 over 1. So there's your slope. Okay, now how do you find your y-intercept given a table? Right, you look for where x equals 0. Isn't that your point that would be on the y-axis? So your y-intercept is positive 1. Okay, number 7. In 2005, Joe planted a tree that was 3 feet tall. In 2010, it was 13 feet tall. Find the rate of change. Does anybody remember what rate of change is the same as? Slope. So all they're asking here is find the slope. So to find slope, don't you have to use the slope formula? So doesn't that mean we need an x1 and an x2 and a y1 and a y2?
5.
Okay, so don't we have to create 2 points from this information? So what would the first point be?
5 and 3.
Well, you can use 2005 3. You can use the whole date. And then what would your second point be? Right, because in 2005 it was 3 feet tall, in 2010 it was 13 feet tall. Now to find the rate of change, the rate the tree's growing per year, you just use the slope formula. So m equals, what goes in the y2 spot? What's your second? Minus, over, minus. And so that becomes 10 over, which reduces to, no, 2 over 1,
Which is 2.
which is just 2. But let's leave it like this, because what does that mean in terms of this problem? 2 feet per year. The tree is growing at a rate of 2 feet per year. So, how tall would we predict the tree to be in 2013? 19 feet. Okay, let's talk about how they got that in case you didn't understand. If it was 13 feet tall in 2010, and now 3 years later, it grows a rate of 2 feet per year, so wouldn't that be 6 feet grown? So 13 plus 6 is 19. Okay, C's a little tricky because some of you don't understand if it means 50 years from here or 50 years from there. We'll just say 50 years old. Like, how tall will it be when it's 50 years old? 103 feet tall. Right. When it was planted, it was already 3 feet tall. But then in 50 years' time, it'll grow 2 feet per year, which is 100 more feet. So that makes it a total of 103 feet tall when it's 50 years old, right? Okay, get your assignment sheet ready so I can tell you what your homework is. Today is January 4th, so you can go. Okay, so in the date box, you'll put 1-4. On the assignment box, you're going to put page 6 and 7.